Hi, how are you today? We now come to a really crucial part of strategic management, which is the analysis of the leadership of a company. In terms of this chapter, we'll do it, as is now the usual case, by decomposing the topic into three areas. The first is the overall culture, the atmosphere, the leadership of the company. This is by far the largest section. We then come to a crucial dimension of good leadership, which is the ability to institute and see through strategic change. And finally, we will use the strategy compass to see how we can measure how effective leadership is. Starting with the overall culture and leadership of the firm, I think atmosphere is an amazing thing. We can't see it, but we can feel it, and we can't live without atmosphere. And it's the same in firms. All firms have an atmosphere or a culture. You can't see it, but for sure it is real and it is vital. Depending on the atmosphere within a firm, you can have tremendous loyalty, or you can have at the other end of the extreme sabotage. You can have companies where the workforce and the managers are united, to others where it's completely fragmented. And it's so important to get the atmosphere right, because visitors or customers, they pick up on it, and you influence them by the atmosphere that you have within your organisation. Indeed, in a study in 2008 by Bain and Company, they said that 81% of all the executives they surveyed said that a company without a winning culture was doomed to mediocrity. It's something we'd better get right. The culture of our company. The first thing I want to say about leadership is that I have down there all managers benefit from great leaders. Everybody benefits from great leaders. I would say that great leaders are the great organs of firms, just as the lungs and the heart, etc., are the great organs of the body. You can't really have great firms unless you have great leaders. I then have a few clips of leaders in action which you can access on YouTube yourself. Some examples of leadership. If I ask you who are today or who have been the great leaders, who are you going to say? You might be surprised at some of the people who are cited by the managers with whom I work, but I leave it to you. Let me go into more detail on this. A lot of this is taken from the work of John Cotter, which you should read. It's really first-class stuff. Is there a distinction between leaders and managers? In other words, are the managerial tasks and the leadership tasks the same, so that a person can seamlessly be a leader or a manager? It doesn't matter. Is it possible to be a great leader and a poor manager, or the other way around? Does it matter? And finally, which is more important? Leadership or management? John Cotter devised this leadership management matrix, where along the horizontal axis we have management, which goes from 0 up to 2 pluses, and on the vertical axis leadership, which goes from 0 up to 2 pluses. And he divided leaders into 4 quadrants, where we have quadrant 1, 2, 3 and 4, and you can read the characteristics of the firms which occupy each of those quadrants. So if you happen to occupy quadrant 1, where you have weak leadership and weak management, look out. Your firm may not be around for much longer. How good are you as a leader? And could you become better? Well, there's always possibilities to improve leadership. Everyone has a sort of a leadership potential which is set by your birth and your early experiences. There's how much has been developed in usable skills. There's how much a person uses the skill to lead. And there is a gap there between the action and the potential And it's possible through reading, through practice, through coaching to bridge that gap and transform mediocre leaders into great leaders. Let's look at some of the research into leaders and some experiences that people have had. The best piece of research was carried out by a Harvard Business School professor called Collins, and here is the top leader that he found, Darwin E. Smith, who in 1971 became chief executive of Kimberly-Clark and utterly transformed that company. There he is. You'll need to read up in the chapter all the great things he did. Some experiences of leading strategic change. Here are some lessons from, I think it's Jenny Duck of the Boston Consulting Group, and she gave about 10 points that leaders should always follow whenever they are trying to implement strategic change. It's a terrific article. You really should read it. Strategic change. This is changing the whole orientation of the firm. Strategic change is very difficult, and for most people it's impossible to achieve. The best example of how to effect strategic change is once again provided by John Cotter, and he has 8 steps for success: urgency, the guiding coalition, vision and strategy, communication, empowering people, having short-term wins, consolidating and driving, and institutionalize the change in culture. The detail of that you'll need to read up. He does conclude, however, that in terms of making a firm a winner or the winning process, it's 75 to 80% leadership and only 20 to 25% management, not the other way round. Ask yourself, how much of a leadership role do you play? How much of a management role do you play? Here's a little pro forma which you can use whenever you're trying to have strategic change. What are the issues? Who's going to deal with them? And when is it going to be completed? The final section is measuring leadership. And as usual, we will go to the strategy compass and look at the area for leadership, which is highlighted in blue. Now, I think this is a little sparse, so I have enhanced it with some other measures of leadership, which you will now see, where we have leadership skill, which will just be a verbal assessment, training per employees, training to sales, labour turnover, absenteeism, strike days. All of those give some sort of insight into the leadership of the firm. As usual, almost everything used in this podcast was Apple, and it just remains for me to thank you for listening to this podcast, and to hope that you listen to some more. So once again, thank you very much, and goodbye.